As you may well know, we've had initially universities or tertiary institutions being funded through what we used to call the DUC system, that is the differentiated unit cost. This particular cost, particular system was an agreement between government and institutions that government would support institutions or students to the tune of 80% of the program costs. But because of difficulties in getting resources from the exchequer and from government, the government was only able to support institutions for many years up to the extent or up to the percentage of 37 to 40%, which led a number of our institutions to go into debt. And as of 2022, the debt that the universities were facing was almost 67 billion. The government then, this administration, came up with the new funding model, which was student-centered, which had percentages and which was based on the MTI. That means the means testing instrument. Now, what was happening in this one was that you undertake the means testing instrument where you indicate or you look at the economic capacity of the parents to support the students in the universities. Now, where a parent was vulnerable, was not able to support the students or to be able to pay the initial or the amount that was due for programs, we realized that a number of students who are admitted to the high-cost programs such as medicine, engineering, were dropping out because we were actually at that point funding parents as opposed to funding students, because we were means testing parents. What is the capacity of the parent to support the student and to what extent? So for some they would support up to 80%, for some 20%, then the other difference would be paid by the government, including scholarships and loans. Now, the main difference between the one that we are introducing is that we are not now testing the capacity of the parents. What we are saying is that we are availing enough resources, and each and every student who has been admitted by COOPs to the universities would be able to get funding for whatever course that they have been admitted. Now, what happened is we just changed the model from looking at what the parent can afford into looking at what we are funding. So, for example, if you get admitted to go and do law, it means you'll become a lawyer, right? So what are we funding? We are funding a lawyer. We are not funding the parent who is not a lawyer. Once we changed this, it was now possible for private sector to look at this funding as an investment. And when we had negotiations with the private sector, they said, if we look at it as funding a doctor, as funding a lawyer, as funding an engineer, as funding a teacher, then it becomes a bankable and fundable investment. So together with the money that the government is giving, in addition, we will be able to get resources from private sector to support the students themselves. So we then have enough money to support the students 100%. And it works this way. Once you are admitted by COOPs, you apply for the facility, it is given to you, you finish your course, you get employed. A year after employment, you start the repayment. Do you understand what I'm saying? You start the repayment a year after employment. There's a grace period from the time you get employed to the time you start paying. So this is the bill that we prepared so that we can now anchor this program in law to allow us to collect resources and to get the support from private sector and other development partners so that we have a pool of resources sufficient to cover each and every student who is admitted into the universities through COOPs.